What if I told you that in 1947, the most powerful naval force in history fled from Antarctica after just 40 days, abandoning a mission meant to last 8 months? What if the coldest place on Earth hid a secret so terrifying, so impossible, that 78 years later, we're still not allowed to speak of it? Ah, the spotlight's flickering. Must be time for another tale. Welcome to Twisted Tale Theatre. I'm Raven, your ever faithful, ever curious host, here to guide you through another fascinating descent into mystery, madness, and maybe a little truth. So sit back, adjust your signal, and remember, none is leaving this theater. Not really. Picture this, dear listeners, August 1946. The world is still catching its breath after the most devastating war in human history. Hitler is dead. The Reich has fallen. Or has it? Because in the halls of the Pentagon, whispers are spreading like frost on glass. Whispers of Nazi submarines vanishing without a trace, of advanced aircraft spotted over South America, of a secret so dark that only one man in the entire United States Navy is qualified to uncover it. That man is Admiral Richard E. Byrd. Now, let me paint you a portrait of our protagonist, shall we? By age 41, Byrd had become the youngest Rear Admiral in Navy history. Medal of Honor recipient, Navy Cross, Flying Cross, 22 citations for valor, including 9 for bravery and 2 for extraordinary heroism. This wasn't some desk-bound bureaucrat, my dear. This was a man who flew over the North Pole when others said it was impossible. A man who thrived where others perished. So when the United States government needed someone to lead the largest, most heavily armed naval expedition ever sent to Antarctica, well, there was only one choice. But what they found down there, what they encountered in that endless white wasteland, would change everything we thought we knew about our world. Operation High Jump, that's what they called it. Innocent enough name, wouldn't you say? Like a child's game on a playground. The official story, oh, it was delightfully mundane. Personnel training in cold weather, equipment, testing, scientific research, military exercises, the sort of bureaucratic nonsense that puts reporters to sleep and keeps senators from asking uncomfortable questions. But here's where our story begins to twist. 4,700 men, 13 ships, a brand new aircraft carrier loaded with bombers, fighters, and helicopters, 2 destroyers, supply ships, icebreakers, 2 heavily armed seaplanes, an attack submarine, all fully stocked with enough firepower to level a small nation. Quite an arsenal for studying the weather, don't you think? The Armada departed in August 1946, bound for the bottom of the world. Admiral Byrd at the helm, confident in his mission, whatever that mission truly was. They arrived at Antarctica on January 15, 1947, and immediately began construction of their base camp, Little America. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The men were in good spirits. The equipment was functioning perfectly. The weather, while harsh, was manageable. And then, something happened. But before we speak of what transpired in those final, terrifying weeks, we must journey back to December 1938, when the world was still blissfully unaware of the horrors to come. Picture, if you will, the SS Schwabenland cutting through Antarctic waters like a knife through silk. On board, scientists, engineers, and members of something called the Thule Society. Now, for those unfamiliar with this particular organization, the Thule Society was Hitler's occult inner circle. They believed, oh, how they believed, in the existence of a superior race living deep within the hollow earth. Aryans, they called them, perfect beings dwelling in subterranean cities, masters of technology beyond human comprehension, and the entrance to their realm, the South Pole. The Schwabenland's mission was simple in concept, impossible in execution. Find these Aryans, make contact, negotiate for their advanced technology, and establish a secret base to facilitate this unholy alliance. What they discovered was remarkable. An Arctic oasis, they called it. 300 square miles of ice-free land, warmed by geothermal vents, complete with plant life and liquid water in temperatures that should have frozen solid. The perfect location for what would become known as Base 211. Over the course of World War II, this base grew, expanded, became a city beneath the ice, complete with submarine pens, aircraft hangars, and laboratories where German engineers worked on projects that would make science fiction authors weep with envy. And when the war turned against the Axis powers, when Berlin fell and Hitler retreated to his bunker, thousands of Nazis vanished, simply disappeared, along with their most advanced aircraft, their research, and their dreams of a Fourth Reich. Where did they go, you ask? Oh, I think you already know. Now we return to our Admiral Byrd, conducting what should have been a routine reconnaissance flight over the Antarctic ice, the morning of. Well, the exact date remains classified, but his secret diary tells us everything we need to know. Clear weather, perfect visibility, his instruments functioning normally as he climbed to 2,300 feet. Just another day at the office for America's most decorated naval aviator, until his compasses began to spin wildly, until his controls became sluggish and unresponsive, until he found himself flying not over the endless white expanse he expected, but over green valleys, flowing rivers, ancient forests that had no business existing in the Antarctic. And there, grazing in a meadow that defied all logic and reason, a mammoth, a creature that should have been extinct for thousands of years, peacefully feeding as if this impossible oasis were the most natural thing in the world. The temperature outside his aircraft, 74 degrees Fahrenheit, in Antarctica, in the middle of winter. But the true shock was yet to come. On the horizon, shining like a jewel against the green landscape, Admiral Byrd witnessed something that changed everything. A city, not ruins, not archaeological remnants, but a thriving, gleaming metropolis that belonged in the pages of Jules Verne rather than a military reconnaissance report. His aircraft began to shudder. The controls stopped responding entirely. And then, approaching from both sides with impossible speed and silence, disc-shaped craft radiating an otherworldly light, close enough to see their markings, close enough to read the symbols emblazoned on their hulls. Swastikas. What happened next, dear listeners, reads like something from the fevered imagination of a pulp science fiction writer. But remember, this is Admiral Richard E. Byrd we're discussing, a man whose word was his bond, whose reputation was built on decades of unshakable integrity. His aircraft, now completely under external control, landed gently in the impossible city. Tall, blonde figures approached. The mythical Aryans, the Nazis, had spent so much time and resources seeking. They escorted our bewildered admiral to an underground facility where he was granted an audience with their leader. The master, as Byrd called him, delivered a message that chills the blood even today. Humanity, he claimed, was too immature for atomic weapons. The recent bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki had not gone unnoticed by those dwelling beneath the ice. Every attempt at peaceful contact had been met with violence, their craft pursued and fired upon by military forces. But Admiral Byrd was different, respected, famous, someone the world might actually believe. The message was simple. Humanity stood at a crossroads: continue down the path of nuclear destruction and face the consequences, or listen to the wisdom of those who had mastered technologies beyond our comprehension and learned to live in peace. After the meeting, Byrd was escorted back to his aircraft. As he flew away from that impossible realm, a voice crackled through his radio speakers. Auf Wiedersehen, until we meet again. He arrived back at base camp 3 hours later than expected. 3 hours of radio silence that the official reports blamed on equipment failure. But Admiral Byrd knew better, and soon, so would his superiors in Washington. Meanwhile, back at Little America, the rest of Operation High Jump was experiencing difficulties of their own. Bright lights appearing on the horizon, craft emerging from beneath the ice at impossible speeds, objects that moved with technologies far beyond anything in the American arsenal. When the Navy opened fire with anti-aircraft guns and cannons, the mysterious craft seemed utterly unaffected. Instead, they responded with precision strikes of their own. The USS Maddox burst into flames and began to sink. Aircraft were destroyed by beams of energy that defied explanation. It wasn't a battle, you understand. It was a demonstration. A clear message that these forces, whatever they were, could have annihilated the entire task force if they had chosen to do so. Instead, they simply encouraged the Americans to leave, and leave they did. On February 26, 1947, after just 40 days of what was supposed to be an 8-month mission, Operation High Jump packed up and the most powerful naval force in history, fleeing from an enemy they couldn't identify, couldn't understand, and certainly couldn't defeat. But here's where our tale takes its most sinister turn. Admiral Byrd, upon returning to Chile, made several statements to the press. He warned of the possibility of devastating aerial attacks on the United States by craft that could travel from pole to pole at incredible speeds. He spoke of a new enemy that could strike anywhere, anytime, regardless of distance. For 2 weeks, he tried to warn the world of what he had discovered beneath the ice, and then silence. After his debriefing in Washington, Admiral Richard E. Byrd never spoke publicly about Operation Highjump again. The mission was immediately classified. Any sailor who discussed what they had witnessed faced arrest and imprisonment. The official story became weather problems and equipment failures. But Admiral Byrd was a meticulous man. He kept records, he documented everything. And just before his death in 1957, he passed a secret diary to his son, a diary that wouldn't surface until decades later. The final entry, dated December 24, 1956, contains these haunting words. The long night of the Arctic ends. The brilliant sunshine of truth shall come again, and those who are of darkness shall fall in its light. For I have seen that land beyond the pole, that center of the great unknown. 3 months later, Admiral Byrd was dead. 18 months after that, the Antarctic Treaty was signed, effectively making the entire continent off limits to anyone without special government permission. Now, some of you clever listeners might be thinking, but Raven, surely some of this can be explained away, and you'd be right to think so. The secret diary has inconsistencies. Some details don't match historical records. Parts of it read like they were borrowed from Hollywood films. But here's what we know for certain. Operation Highjump happened. It was cut short for reasons that were never said. Admiral Byrd did make those cryptic statements to the Chilean press. The mission was classified, and records remain sealed to this day. And just a few months after Operation Highjump ended, something crashed in the desert near Roswell, New Mexico. Something the government spent decades denying, explaining away, and covering up. Coincidence? Perhaps, but in a world where the most powerful military force on Earth can be sent fleeing from the bottom of the world, well, one begins to wonder what other impossible truths might be hiding in the shadows. And so, dear listeners, we reach the end of another tale from the darkest corners of our world's hidden history. The ice of Antarctica keeps its secrets well, doesn't it? Locked away beneath miles of frozen silence, protected by international treaties and government classifications. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls just right, you can almost hear them. Whispers from beyond the pole, warnings from beneath the ice, messages we're still too afraid to hear. Until next time, remember what Admiral Byrd discovered in those 3 lost hours. Not all truths are meant for the surface world. Some secrets prefer the darkness. Some mysteries prefer to remain twisted. This has been Raven, your faithful host, reminding you that in the theater of the impossible, the final curtain never truly falls. Sweet dreams, if you can manage them.